Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. I'm Brea Baker here with my co-host Jamira Burley, and today we're putting U.S. foreign policy under a magnifying glass and posing some real questions about the state of our international affairs and all of the global implications of the mess we have going on here in the U.S.
From Signalgate, where senior leaders in the Trump administration was sharing classified information over group texts, to the crackdown on peaceful dissent against the war in Palestine, our government is getting a lot of things wrong, unfortunately, and having a major impact on how the world sees us, as well as our interactions with our allies. And we're going to break it all down because I think what we're seeing is that what happens here in the U.S. has the ability to impact people around the world and vice versa. We are so interconnected, and that is becoming front and center as many of the policies from the Trump administration continues to be announced and implemented.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
But first, talk about
that because we got a lot to get through. There's a lot
I don't even watch the news half the times or read the news. It's just like, more.
No, it's such an onslaught. And it's like every day it's something else. And there's like this TikTok trend of Americans being like, if you live outside of the country, what are they telling you that we're not hearing? And it's always just like, y'all are embarrassing. Y'all are ruining the world. Y'all have no diplomacy. Your leaders are like, and it's just like, yeah, that's
we're the reality show for the rest of the world. They're consuming. They're definitely consuming us right now, and it's not fun. I would just like to be listed as the sane housewife in this saga, potentially. But yeah, what's your first?
I want those confessionals. That's what I want. I want confessionals.
Those confessionals would be tea. So much tea. I would be kicked off because my confessionals would be a hot mess.
Exactly.
I guess these are kind of our confessionals, though, realistically.
Basically, yeah. This is our moment. This is our chance. So I'm taking full advantage of it. Okay. Well, let's start it up. So as a bit of good news to start it off, Booker makes a stand against Trump and doesn't stop for 25 hours. What was really cool about that which I think people are aware of, is that the record for the longest filibuster was previously held by a vehement white supremacist who was standing in the way of the 1957 Civil Rights Bill. So it is exciting to see him rolling in his grave and getting knocked off of that list. And what is not included in this headline, and what I have to add in as I'm remixing it, is that the day after taking this stand, Senator Cory Booker became one of the Democratic senators to vote against the motion to block arms sales to Israel. And so it was just really frustrating because it's like, okay, you had 25 hours of talking about good trouble and doing the right thing and standing up to fascist genocidal regimes, and then voted against not even ending violence, but just curbing the US's role in the violence. Like, it wasn't going to stop what Israel was doing, but it was going to mean that we weren't going to be providing the arms. And unfortunately, Senator Cory Booker was not one of the senators who voted against that. And so, his good buddy, Chris Murphy, who stood with him, did. And I believe 17 other senators voted to block arms. But it was just frustrating to see him, continue to stand with Israel.
Yeah, continue to stand with his donors. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we need to take, big dollar donors out of the electoral politics, because it creates this ethos in which the politicians are no longer listening to their voters, right? Because the vast majority of voters are saying we should not be sending arms to Israel. We should not perpetuate this genocide that is happening. And yet politicians continue to go where their donors are. And in this case, major it's like APAC. But yeah, at the same time, right, two truths can be held at the same time. And I thought that his actions the day before of, filibustering, many people are the definition of filibustering, because technically he wasn't opposing a potential legislation or stopping potential actions by the Senate. But I thought it was a moment for people to realize that there are things they can do, right? This does not have to be a helpless moment, that there are small actions that we can take that may not change the world, right? Famous quote, Like I've said it before, I may not change the world, but I will spark the brain that will change the world. So sometimes our small acts of good trouble will lead to bigger trouble, bigger good trouble, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to be on record at certain points. Like, I think ultimately we talk a lot about not complying in advance. And I do think it's important to put on the record that people are upset, frustrated, not in alignment with what is happening. I think that was what was important about his speech, that it wasn't just like he read Green Eggs and Ham for 20 something hours the way that Ted Cruz did when trying to block the Affordable Care Act, but that he was actually talking about.
Really? I did not know that.
Oh, you didn't? Yes, he literally read Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss and other children's books. And so it's like, okay, that's an easier way to get through it. But what I did appreciate about Senator Booker was that he used the full 25 hours to discuss and talk about the impact of Trump administration decisions, and to put on record what that will do so that it can never be said that everyone just laid down and went with it. And I think so that was the good part. And yeah, I think the other part is making sure that we are consistent in this, that if we can critique what Trump is doing here, we know what it looks like then. We know what fascism looks like. We know what dictatorships look like. And so we cannot feign that we don't know what that looks like in other spaces where we are funding and bankrolling the violence. And so that's where that came from. But as you said, people listen to the big donor dollars. What I didn't realize during his 25-hour filibuster was that he had been wearing a Israel pin during the filibuster.
And he didn't mention any of the protests. He also didn't mention, I think one of his constituents were one of the people that have been disappeared by the Trump administration because of their stance on what's going on and to the Palestinian people. So
yeah. So we got to be consistent. We got to hold the line to the fire. But yeah, hold
the line to the fire. And again, like, I think what a lot of voters are saying, you can both support Israel and still believe that what is happening in Palestine to the Palestinian people is wrong. You could still believe that violence is not the solution. We can't in one breath say that violence is not the solution in order for us to seek justice and liberation, while at the same time arming people with the literal weapons that enables for them to conduct that violence. To your point in regards to a fascist state that we are currently seeing unfold before our eyes, in the article by The Guardian, the title of the article is called "It Reminds Us of a Fascist State, Smithsonian Institute's Brace for Trump's Rewriting of History." I just want to remind folks, the good people in history were never people attacking history, and were never people attacking books and reading and education. Those folks were never on the right side of history. Ever. Anytime you look at fascist governments, fascist regimes, anytime you look at oppressive governments, those folks always attack people's ability to learn and educate themselves, because when you educate yourself, you arm yourself with the tools and the stories and the history that can give you the kind of the inspiration to seek change. But also they attack museums, they attack institutions of truth. And so watching the Trump administration now trying to target the Smithsonian, particularly the National African American and Culture Smithsonian, which I have had the pleasure to go to many of times. We were just there a few months ago together, and it's an opportunity for the Trump administration to rewrite history in a way that does not reflect the true history of Black people in this country, because Black people is American history and Black history is world history, right? And they're trying to change that every single day.
Yeah. And again, people being furloughed. I think the folks who are leading the charge there, and this is all a part of the Trump administration executive order, which was restoring truth and sanity. This is anything but restoring truth and sanity. And as you said, those who are anti-intellectualism, those who are rewriting history, those who don't want history to be told in an honest way. Like, if you're mad that we are calling moments in history racist, then be mad at the acts of racism and don't continue to do them, so that we now the 2025 era is also going to be talking about white supremacy. And that's the frustrating part. You're more mad at the historians recounting history than you are about what actually happened to real people during those times. We have grandparents, not even grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles who lived through these eras, who are having to sit through and watch the story of those moments being retold in ways that just were not what were happening at the time. And it's really scary to see.
Yeah. I mean, and one of those truths of that past is in the Smithsonian is the casket of Emmett Till. And we all know the story of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy who was brutally beaten by a white mob and then lynched because he, quote unquote, whistled at a white woman. Like, that is the history of America. And until we are faced with the reality of it, we're going to continue to repeat it again. And we see it being repeated again where white mobs and our white supremacists are trying to attack Black towns and Black people across this country. And by erasing this history, Trump is saying that he is willing to erase Black people in order to present a false narrative of the history of America, as if the world, as if the true history of America does not exist in books, in movies, in documentaries, and in museums outside of this country. But I think he's banking on the fact that the vast majority of Americans do not travel and won't have access to those resources. And that's a dangerous game to play.
1,000,000%.
1 million. Is 1 million, 1 zillion percent.
1 trillion %. No, but actually, though, I think that's the part that is getting more and more alarming, because I think I see some Black folks who respond to this and like, that's why it's important that we teach our history. I've never been concerned with Black people not knowing our history. Yeah, through oral tradition, through reading banned books anyway, through our own personal records. We are always going to tell our own history. The challenge is that if we are the only ones who know our history, then we are constantly being told that we are the ones spitting out fake news. And we're not a large enough part of the electorate or the larger population for us knowing the history to be enough. We need everyone to know our history so they vote accordingly. We need everyone to know our history so that they're vigilant against recurrences. Because right now we're seeing so much of a return and a resurgence of like Jim Crow era legislation and mindsets and mentalities. And if people don't know that it's a return, they don't know what it leads to. And so I think that's the danger, is like history repeats itself, and we're failing, as people say all the time, we're failing the open book test because people don't know history. And so when people don't know, they think that this is going to lead to something good for them, and ignorance becomes bliss and becomes a tool and becomes a weapon for the right. Yeah. And speaking of not knowing history, the last headline I want to share is that Netanyahu says Israel is now dividing up Gaza. What does that mean on the ground? Let's be clear. The violence in Gaza, the violence across Palestine has always been an effort for a land grab. I'm not going to get into a full history lesson here, but in 1948, post-Holocaust, there was this decision that global leaders were saying is like, we need to do right by the international Jewish community because so much violence has occurred. And that violence did need to be rectified. But the answer to that violence was to say, let us annex some land for these Jewish people, give it to them so that we don't have to answer for our crimes within our nation borders. We don't have to answer for the fact that Anne Frank's family tried to flee and get refuge and asylum in the United States and were denied. We don't have to answer for that if we can give them some land somewhere else and make that a safe place for them. And so before it was decided that Israel would exist in what is Palestine, they were like, well, maybe let's do it in Argentina. Maybe let's do it. Like, so many other places were offered up. They decided it would be Palestine.
Offered up by people who did not own it. Let's be
offered up by people who did not own it, by populations who did not commit the violence. Like, they didn't say, let's give and annex away parts of Germany, parts of Poland, no, let's offer up places in the global South to be the justice and the restitution, the reparations for the Holocaust. And so what happened is that places that were inhabited by people, by Christians and Muslims and Jewish people of Palestinian nationality were annexed away to this new population of Israelis. And so even like Netanyahu, I'm pretty sure was born in the United States, but is not a prime minister, right?
I'm not going to tell you where he's from. He's from Philly.
Uh-oh. I was saying, dang, that means it's Billy. But you have people who are not born in this region who are claiming that they are indigenous to the region, that they have more rights than the Palestinian people who've been living there for generations and generations. And it's all been a land grab. And so now we're seeing the silent part being said out loud, that after more than a year of 50,000 Palestinian civilians being killed, after decades of violence, you're seeing that the land is in fact being grabbed, as it has been since the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And it's just not right. It's just not right. And we've seen this play out in other places when European nations decided they were going to divide up the African continent and say, you get this part, you get this part, France, I'll take this part down here, Portugal, y'all take that part over there, UK. And they're doing the same thing to Palestine in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism is real. I'm never going to deny that. Anti-Semitism is real. It's vile. It's disgusting. The people in power right now are not fighting anti-Semitism. They are unleashing a war and unleashing a genocide in the name of taking land and using anti-Semitism as a scapegoat. And that's the scary part, that as ceasefires are being denied, they're still doing so in Palestine. We're going to get into this later. I'm going to get off of my soapbox, but it's scary to see Netanyahu saying the silent part out loud now, because he knows that he has no fear of any accountability, that the Senate is still going to continue sending arms, that people around the world are still going to stand with Israel in the name of this false war on anti-Semitism, which is really a land grab.
Yeah, and I just want to remind folks, like, if you truly believe that genocide is wrong, if you truly believe that stripping people of their land, their culture, if you believe in, genocide, if you believe in violence being not the solution, regardless of who's doing it, you should believe that this is wrong, right? Like, you should be questioning why we're allowing this to happen in broad daylight on national television, world television, right? In front of our eyes, where babies are, like, the vast majority. I don't think people realize that more than 70% of the victims over the last year and a half have been women and children. They are not members of Hamas. We're talking about children who are not old enough to reach their first birthday. Like, that is the people that they're fighting, right? Those people are not armed soldiers. And so I think this is a moment to really reevaluate what you've been told, the lies we've all been told, and how the U.S. is playing a role in helping to perpetuate those lies, which is leading to real violence against real people. In my next article, or my next headline, we probably all woke up today and realized that our 401ks and that our stock portfolios, if you have it, because 60% of Americans don't participate in the stock market, or that your job may be impacted due to the recent tariffs that the Trump administration has announced across a number of countries, I think more than a dozen countries. And as a response, we're seeing 3 countries that normally do not collaborate with each other, China, Japan, South Korea, have jointly responded to the U.S. tariffs on China, on Chinese state media. This is unprecedented. They have not jointly had a conversation in the last 5 years about economic prosperity until recently, and now they're presenting joint statements. And I just want to remind folks, look at the tag on your shirt, look at the tag on your jeans, the hood of your car. Look at where your devices are made, right? All of these things oftentimes come from outside of the US. And that is going to make these devices, these materials, more expensive for you as the consumer. But also, what does this say when we're creating such a hostile environment with some of our closest allies and our closest adversaries, right? At a time where there's already financial constraints. And now we're almost empowering collaboration across people who we normally collaborate with, but also our adversaries, to work jointly together against us. And that's not a reality that we continue to face.
I mean, that's to say the least. Do you know how bad you got to be to get China, Japan, and South Korea on one accord? Again, I know not everybody is a student of history or knows what's happening beyond their own borders, because our government does not want that to happen. But if you just look at the history of the 20th century, just World War II, like Japan, South Korea, China, they are not typically on the same side of anything. Okay, there's so much animosity and held up hostility and grievances and grudges. And they said, forget all of that. We got bigger fish to fry. It's the United States that we got beef with, for real, for real. Let's come together. Let's unite. I mean, I think everyone around the world is like, is this an April Fool's joke? Like, China, Japan, and South Korea? What? we are creating Voltrons in other parts of the country, of other parts of the globe, where people are coming together like Transformers against us. And we have no one to blame but the Trump administration senior officials. And I mean, this is scary times, y'all, especially because, as you said, we are so dependent on a lot of these nations for the products that we get. And that's partly our own doing as well. Like, there's not been enough incentivization for local products being made well and with care and all of that in America. And so we are so dependent. And so the way to curb dependency is not to put these insane tariffs that are going to only affect American consumers who are not able to get the things that they need, and then force people to become adversaries of us. I mean, it only hurts us.
Yeah, we're isolating ourselves from the rest of the world, and it feels very incel-like, very on a national stage. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive a little bit deeper into these topics. For those who are just tuning in, I just want to remind you, you're watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network, and we'll be right back.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now.
Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history.
Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Reid Out, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin, or download the Black Star Network app.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Before the break, we talked about the latest headlines, and now we're going to dig into the latest news regarding the U.S. military and the ways the senior Trump leaders are spreading this callousness around the world.
Yeah. Let's start with Yemen. It was a week or two ago that leaders with some of the highest security clearances in the world convened over a group chat in Signal to discuss very sensitive plans to target Houthis in Yemen. The plan was to airstrike apartment buildings full of civilians, might I add. And the kicker is that in addition to organizing these plans and apps, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was accidentally added to the said group chat and was privy to everything. What? What?
I just want to say that, like, I've made many group chat mistakes in my lifetime. I've sent wrong pictures. I've asked wrong questions. I've added incorrect people because, you know, names. But I have never, and I do mean never, shared national. I have never added an adversary, because that's what I would assume that the Trump administration would see the Atlantic editor as an adversary, right? Like someone who doesn't believe in the cause, who's not a supporter, to a group chat that gives them the evidence and the information to bury me, right? Like I would never, that I have never done. And it's especially funny, not funny, but funny, haha, but funny.
Yeah.
Is the incompetence to the highest degree. And this is coming from a party that would not shut up until like 2 years ago, would not shut up. And actually will still bring it up as a defense mechanism about the Hillary Clinton emails, right? They would not downplay it. They literally pre-juried themselves by lying about what was in the group chat what was not shared, who was in the group chat, what was the intended purpose, and then to come back the next day and be like, oh, I just forgot.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, you forgot. Well, we have screenshots. And then that was the best part. The best part was that initially, when they first got exposed, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was like redacting things to say, I actually don't want to expose them so much because it could threaten, real people who are working in national security, right? And they're like, nothing in there was classified. Nothing in there was classified. Okay, bet. If you say nothing was classified, then let's drop everything. Oh, so now you're perjuring yourself again. And you forgot, but we're supposed to trust you with all of this heavy duty information and blah, 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 blah. There's so many things that went wrong. Number one, Congress is supposed to approve military action and acts of war. No one in that group chat was Congress. Number two, discussions and records regarding military action are supposed to be preserved and archived for accountability purposes. And these chats were specifically designed to disappear. And as someone who has also used Signal, you use Signal when you don't want your information to be recorded and preserved and found by someone else later. As a civilian, that is your absolute right to be able to do. People use Signal to buy weed, people use Signal to organize protests, whatever. That's your right as a civilian. But y'all are government officials. So what are y'all discussing in these chats? And what are we being blocked from accessing? Because it's not just that they were using Signal, because this obviously launched a whole investigation. And it was later found out that senior Trump officials are also using personal Gmail accounts to discuss this sensitive information. So yeah, I don't even like Hillary Clinton personally, but I never want to hear about her emails ever again. Y'all are using Signal and Gmail. What's next? Y'all are Instagram DMing.
I mean, I went past them, and it's so funny.
Apple Pays.
Girl, yeah, actually, that was a thing. Their Venmos were public. Like, you could see the transactions on their Venmo. Like, the level of incompetence could not be overlooked because, I mean, I'll be honest. Like, many of you probably know I worked on Hillary's 2016 campaign as the Deputy National Millennial Vote Director, and I remember that just not being such a sticking point for people, being like, "Oh my God, this is national." Like, this is about national security interests, the lack of carelessness, the incompetence. But like, say what you want about Hillary. She's one of the most educated, most educated people that have ever ran for president, right? Like, across the board. She's not only educated, she's extremely smart, even if you don't agree with her perspective. That being said, the idea that these are the same folks pushing for the elimination of DEI only to make way for white incompetence is absolutely hilarious, because there was not a person of color on these chats. And it just goes to show you that white mediocrity reigns supreme, right? Like,
and you guys, Tulsi, but nobody claim her.
Nobody, like, I didn't even remember. That's how much I don't claim her. Like, no one claims her. No one remembers her. But you're right. I'm surprised they didn't try to throw her ass under the bus in many ways. But yeah, like, this is just. I was flabbergasted when I first heard about it, and the more details that come out, I am additionally flabbergasted. I also think one thing that many people are not talking enough about is the fact that we are talking about individual. It was both the carelessness of the actions, but also the callousness of how they talked about the actions.
Yeah.
And the action being bombing one of the poorest countries in the world by one of the richest countries in the world, right? And they were sending fist bumps and American flags and just the callousness. 50 civilians who were minding their business, just existing, lost their lives as a result. So many people were injured. Children were injured, and people in a group chat are cheering them on, and at the same time, just thinking this is the appropriate way to talk about the loss of life.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the most alarming things. I mean, like, children were killed. Civilian infrastructure has been affected in a country that cannot afford to have civilian infrastructure being lost. And it's that same callousness that is used to keep the American working class poor and exploited. It's that same callousness that doesn't value life anywhere in the globe unless it is in service. Because, I mean, yeah, they're talking in the chat like, should we bomb them? But I hate to give Europe any like. Wait, we're talking about ending people's lives, and you're deciding whether you want to do it based on who you like, who you don't like, like, pretending the material in the chat wasn't sensitive was one thing, or that the chat simply didn't exist until more receipts were dropped is another thing. But the actual, like, even if it was done in an official and buttoned up capacity, the fact that the people in charge of and who have the power to greenlight these sorts of offenses and airstrikes are so callous, are so cavalier, is the thing that is the most concerning, because ultimately there was no conversation really about collateral damage, about how to make sure, like, is this the least destructive way to go about this? It was just very much like, I mean, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it, and can y'all do it before this time, because I got this. And yeah, fist bump, American flag emoji. Yes, I'm praying for our victory. Like, it was just insane. Everyone should be impeached, removed from their offices. And it's more and more why I want more women in these positions. I mean, though Tulsi Gabbard didn't do much there, but I just think that the way that these white men were approaching this was with such disregard for human life. And I think that's the part that is the most scary, is like, y'all are doing this like it's a video game, like this is Call of Duty or something.
I mean, and that's the one I was having a conversation with someone about that, like the evolution of warfare. And again, we're not at war. Only Congress can declare that. But the evolution of warfare has really created this weird dystopia where people are so far removed from the actions that they take, they actually don't experience the level of violence that they would normally experience when we think about, like, olden times where, in order to attack an enemy, you had to walk across the field and they shoot first and then you reload and then you shoot first, right? And then also oftentimes the leader of that country or the leader of that militia would be leading the charge, right? Would be at the front with their men. They would see the onslaught of death and destruction and would make decisions that was much more reflective of, I would hope so, like preserving human life, right? Because you actually see these men, their names, and they are not just like numbers, versus now people are just pushing a button, right? Pushing a button and things blow up. And
thousands of miles away.
Where they are not directly impacted. And it's really disturbing and disgusting, especially because we are seeing how students and professors and activists are being attacked all across this country. Some are being picked up on the side of the road as they're waiting for a bus. Some are being taken out of their homes and disappeared. Some are being put in jails in El Salvador for having to just be existing, and maybe the person in El Salvador wasn't an activist, but like the idea that people are going missing for less things than what this administration has and is planning to do, and has been projected in this group chat that was just like, come on, like, are you dumb? Like, not only are y'all creating enemies around the world with our allies and adversaries, you're now talking about very sensitive information on a chat that could be infiltrated by those same entities.
Right.
Like,
like, it's so easily hackable. So, I mean, clearly you don't even need to hack in. They might just add you on accident and then you'll have access to everything.
One of the individuals on the chat was in Russia at the time. All you would have to do, like, the messages are encrypted so no one can see it. Like, no one can like view it externally onto their phone. But if you have someone's phone, you can view all the information.
Oh, yeah.
Like
1,000,000%. Yeah.
Like
yeah. And I think to your point about the activists and professors and students who are being targeted as well, I think that's another element that is really scary, because on the one hand, the administration is continuing to do more and more dangerous things that require critique and rigorous critique at that. But then on the other end, they are firing, abducting, and detaining anyone who is critiquing this administration. You had a PhD student at Tufts, a Fulbright scholar, who was abducted in the middle of the night, or not in the middle of the night, like as she's going home after fasting all day. And the crime that she was accused of was writing an op-ed against the genocide in Palestine. You have Yale, who is firing a professor because of an AI-produced story that said that this person is connected to Hamas. You have Columbia University complying with the Trump administration with mask bans and giving felony records and rescinding diplomas for students who were protesting non-violently at that, because encampments are not violent protests. Let's be clear. No one was harmed. Property wasn't even destroyed. People sat out in tents on campuses that they are paying tuition to, whether through scholarship funding or through direct funding themselves, and they should be allowed to do so. And it's like really ironic that this fascist crackdown on free speech is coming from the same conservatives who won't shut up about free speech and their ability to spit fake news on any platform they desire. But the truth, oh no, now that's too far. Y'all can't talk about the truth.
No, that's so true. And the idea, I mean, two things I will say is this is the same group of people that say those in white hoods and MAGA hats could go around and be destructive. This is also the same group that, that believes that people should be able to say whatever they want and regardless of the consequences, and you should protect free speech, but only when it comes from their side. But I also think it's what people need to understand, like, even if, right, like for some reason, and a year later, you still believe that Israel has the right to defend itself. I think there are multiple issues that we need to discuss, right? There's the Israel has a right to defend. You should still be very fearful of the idea that writing an article, posting about a topic that you believe in could get you taken, right? To have you disappeared by the state. That in itself is also a dangerous thing, because the question is, when will it end? When will you say something, right? Like, even if you're on this moment, you're on the side of the government, like, or the side of the state, you believe what the state is doing in this issue. When a moment you don't believe when the state is doing something, what is going to stop them from disappearing you? Right? What is going to stop them from taking away your entire livelihood and like breaking up your family and deporting you and potentially throwing you in a cell in El Salvador? There's nothing to stop them, right? Like, you're providing the government this level of power without any checks and balances or without any due process makes all of us unsafe. If we don't have due process for the criminals, best believe it's only a matter of time before they call us a criminal, and there's no due process for us. So it's going to have rippling effects. And I think, unfortunately, by the time people realize what this means, it's going to be too late. And that in itself is going to be an interesting time, because we know the government is only waiting for their moment to call martial law, right? Like, to turn the military, to turn police against civilians in order to justify the actions of abuse and violence against its people. But we're going to talk more about it with our guests when we come back. If you are watching, this is On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network, with my co-host, Brea Baker. And next, we will have Hannah Reid, who will be joining us to talk more about this topic.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
everyone. We are back on the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network. Before the break, Brea and I talked briefly about what is the state of affairs, both domestically and internationally, and how those two worlds are colliding together. And now we're going to bring up one of the people that I've admired online, who has had really great takes and insight and analysis on a lot of topics that have intersected with some of the things we've talked about today and in previous episodes. So we have Reid, who is a brilliant digital organizer and content creator, to help us unpack this moment with care and nuance. So thank you, Hannah, for joining us on the other side of change.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was such a flattering introduction. I feel like I've learned so much from you as well. And it's so funny because I feel like professionally we're in like similar spaces, but
I know, and we have not met. It's officially weird.
I'm sure if we sat down and like really dug through it, we'd find that we have like all of these mutual connections, because I feel like the political world, especially like the Black political world, is very small. But yeah, no, I'm excited to chat with y'all.
Well, thank you.
Yes, no, we're so excited to have you here, and I'm so excited to learn from you. I just feel like there's so much to discuss. I don't even know where to begin, but I just feel like the American news and media systems often underreport the true nature and impact of U.S. foreign policy. So there are a lot of people in our country who are moving through their days just completely oblivious to the fact that we are dropping bombs and unleashing so much violence on other parts of the world. So what are you seeing right now, whether it's regards to Yemen, Palestine, tariffs, anything internationally that you feel like should be raising alarms for Americans of conscience, and maybe there's just not enough discussion about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many levels to it. American success, American dominance comes at the expense of the global South. And I think you can see that from like the economic standpoint, like the way we exploit Africa, particularly the DRC and Congo, for their minerals and things like that, so that we can have iPhones and electric vehicles and all of these things, which I think is something that people just don't know about, people don't think about. Like all of us, you know, we go and we buy our phone and we move on with our life, and we don't think about everything that went into getting that. And then from like another lens of it is, you know, like imperialism and like military dominance, the way that like Israel essentially functions as a settler colony for not just the United States, but for like the Western world, the way that the United States has like active colonies, basically, when you think about Puerto Rico or Guam or the Mariana Islands, and how we're seeking to expand that even further with the way that Trump talks about like Greenland and the Panama Canal. And yeah, and then you have our like overt military action in Yemen, which, as much as we say it's to fight terrorism and like defend us, it's to defend the economy, it's to defend capital. The Houthis have been able to enforce a blockade in the Red Sea that, like, when you really think about global politics, they have the right to do. That is their territory. And because they're blocking ships from Amazon and things like that, that is seen as a threat to the United States, a threat to the West. And so in response, like, we bomb apartment buildings as if that's like a reasonable solution to that. And I think so much of it is people just don't know about it. Our media doesn't report it. And even those who like kind of know, it's so abstract. It's something that's happening over there. And we have so many problems here. Of course, the stuff that happens over there is going to like get pushed to the side, especially when you don't realize that it's all kind of connected.
Yeah. Ooh, that's deep. Yeah. Because it is all connected. It really is.
Yeah, and to the like so interconnected that people don't realize that the reason why we don't have funds to do the things that we want to do to make American lives better is because we're spending it on things like that, right? It's so interesting watching Elon Musk and Doge idea that they want to get rid of fraud and abuse, but they didn't do that at the Department of Defense, right? At a Black budget that has the vast majority of American dollars that the most of us don't even know where those dollars go. And they haven't passed an audit in years, right? And so I'm always trying to help people understand that these things are so interconnected that we can't ask for better healthcare here, better education here, better streets and roads, better jobs here, if we are allowing our tax dollars to be used as wages of war elsewhere. So, for you, Hannah, as someone who is deeply enshrined in like digital spaces where a lot of young people are discussing these topics in very nuanced ways, how is social media being used both as a tool and a weapon, particularly in regards to the whims and priorities of people who are trying to understand these issues in the spaces and places that they are?
Yeah, well, first, I actually want to go back to something that you just said about Doge and the Department of Defense and how, our money is going towards bombs and not going towards hospitals, not going towards schools. And a big part of that is because the people who are making these decisions, Elon Musk, a lot of Trump's cabinet, they are profiting from DoD contracts. Elon Musk gets billions of dollars in government contracts for SpaceX, for Tesla. A lot of it is through the DoD, so we actually don't fully know how much of that money is because some of it is confidential and things like that. So when you think about why is it that Doge, they're cutting USAID, which I have my own issues with, but that is such a small part of the budget. And then they're going to continue to give the people within the cabinet billions of dollars. That's what that is. And then when you talk about, to answer your question, how can we discuss this online and what is the use of the online space in these fights? It's a big part of it is just letting people know that, letting people, helping people to connect these dots of yes, this thing that you're saying, even I know people don't want to believe that Trump supporters can be changed. And most of them cannot, but a lot of them, they're just really ignorant. They don't know. They haven't had anyone connect the dots for them. But if you can say, hey, I agree with you that government spending is kind of whack and that we send money to places that don't actually help our communities, and then put the dots together and the reason that is because the people deciding where the money goes are sending it to themselves rather than to communities. I think you can start getting communities to understand the ways that the government is not serving them so that they can just start thinking about how do we make the government serve us? And that can look a lot of different ways. I think in this moment in particular, you have people who feel like we have to get to 2026. We just have to get some checks and balances back in our government. Or we have to invest local. And I know that's something I've been doing on my channel a lot, is talking about how your local governments can protect you and how you can push your local governments to protect you better. And then, there's the third category of people who are look, this system is clearly screwing us all over. It might just need to go. And I do hope that people start thinking about, okay, so how would that happen? And what would that look like? And how can we do that in a way that's going to still protect the most vulnerable? Because I do think when people start getting a little radical and talking about burning down systems, they often leave out the fact that the most vulnerable in our communities are going to really struggle with the burning down of our systems, even though they're still struggling now. But I don't know. I think you can see in other countries what happens when a government collapses. I don't necessarily want that here unless we have something to fill in that gap. Yeah. And a lot of people don't think about what's going to fill in those gaps.
That is really deep. Because I do think that as much as we talk about revolution, people don't really think of what comes after it. One of the quotes that I love by Assata Shakur is that we need to be weapons of mass construction, not just destruction. And I love that because it is really mindful of the fact that I don't just want to tear things down just for the sake of tearing things down, because ultimately our people have needs, our people have wants, our people have fears, our people have motivations, and all of that needs to be addressed. And so our goal is to design something better than what is. And I love the way that you talked about connecting the dots. And I want to even dig deeper there, because there's so many people disillusioned into believing that what happens beyond their borders doesn't matter to or affect them. And so you kind of discussed the way that, well, it does matter, number one, because the money that could be used to make your quality of life better here is instead being used to harm people over there. But what are some of the other dots that need to be connected, and how we just need to care about the fact that, I mean, even when it's not money that would be used here, we should still not want people to be harmed over there because of what our tax dollars are doing. I mean, that's how we got Vietnam War protests and all that. So yeah, could you just connect even more of those dots for folks?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about that is the difference between hard power and power. And I think going back to like the USAID thing again, I got my own issues with them. They do a lot with the CIA, but what the function in theory of USAID was US soft power. So it's building relationships with these other countries by providing something. And I think the US does soft power poorly because we give people bad deals. I've been really fortunate to like travel all over the world and like get the perspective of like business owners and things like that from other countries. And like there is a feeling of like the US will, offer you something really great, but like what you have to sacrifice in return isn't worth it. Like I know in Africa, for example, like, yeah, they're going to give all this aid, but they're going to ask to control your elections. Like that's not great. And so, but the function of that again is the relationships. So if we remember back like a year ago, Osama bin Laden's like letter to America was going around, and people like all these young people were like, oh, he's kind of cooking. And it's like, okay, well, let's wait a second. But I think the part that like I do hope people connected with that is like what he was saying about the United States was valid. And like the reason that he felt that way and the reason that we had terrorists like him is because of the United States' own actions. So even from like a soft power, hard power perspective, if we go out with soft power and we try to influence people to like us, to treat us well, that is, and that's a reasonable strategy. Trump and conservatives, they're really wanting to lean into hard power right now, which puts us exactly back into the situation like with the letter to America, where it's like we're bombing countries, we're terrorizing communities, and then we're shocked that like these countries and these communities are radicalized against us and bring violence back into the United States. Like, I don't think we can be shocked by that. We're going, if you were a young person in Yemen watching this country bomb your country over and over and over again, you're not going to want to punch back. Of course you are. So yeah, from even just a self-preservation perspective, we should not want our country to be the big bad wolf of the globe, because that puts us in a really vulnerable position safety-wise as well. And that's not even getting into like how much potential collaboration we're losing and how much opportunity we're losing to like just bond with people throughout the world, like cultural exchange and everything. But like we're literally putting ourselves at risk because we are the aggressors of the world.
Yeah, and let me clarify something, because I know how things are chopped and screwed to create a particular narrative. Hannah is not saying she supports Osama bin Laden, just to clarify.
No, I'm not.
But what I think you are alluding to is the idea that we oftentimes create our own enemies, right? By our actions, by our use, by our neglect of how we interact with folks around outside of our borders. And it's really important to note that if you look at any sort of like attack or any sort of malice or any sort of like war that we've ever been in, oftentimes there is rooted back in how US has previously dealt with that entity and how that it came home to roost, right? Eventually those same tactics and tools and violence comes back to impact American people. So that's why things like soft power is important, because you're able to build bridges and also hopefully help to sustain communities, so that way, poor people do not feel the need to resort to violence in order to get the resources and tools that they need in order to be successful, regardless of where they are in the world. And, you also alluded to this idea that, and I know this is hard for many people who are in their F around and find out stage, wanting to like blast everyone who is suffering in this moment. But we do need to get out of our echo chamber, right? Because I think it's very easy to see all Trump supporters, and a lot of them are racist, right? Full stop. But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them do feel disenfranchised by the entire American government, both the right and the left. And what does it look like for us to move outside of our echo chambers, to have real conversations with people and educate them on the topics that intentionally they have not been educated before about? Like, we see the attacks on education because we know Republicans love stupid voters. That's not me saying that, that's Trump saying that, right? So like, how do we move outside of our echo chambers, and what are some of the ways you've done so that is, that you feel like has been really fruitful in order for us to build bridges for people who previously didn't agree with us?
Yeah, I mean, the state of education in this country is just like so alarming.
Trash.
And I think I mean, it's like, it's so scary. Kids can't read, like kids cannot read, but
I read when adults can't read either. So there's that.
And they can't. And it's so funny, like, not to be shady, but some of these people you talk to online that'll go on and on about the theory, and then you talk to them and it's like, oh, but you didn't read the book. Okay. But
so real.
Anyway, I think another important thing in this education conversation is to think about who is providing these communities resources. And I think about this from the global perspective as well, because I was fortunate enough to do a justice tour in Appalachia a few months ago. And one of the things I learned was that the fossil fuel companies that are poisoning these communities, they're also paying for the school, and they're paying for the hospital, and they're paying for the park, and they're paying for the church. So these people's entire communities, these people, educational resources, their health resources, everything is based around this company that is exploiting them. And so then of course, the education that they're going to get from those places, the healthcare they're going to get from those places is going to be biased in favor of this company that is exploiting them. And it's really tough to break through that. In some ways, you can only break through that if you're in that community. That was one of the other things I learned on this tour, is that there are these incredible women in Appalachia on the ground. They're getting kicked out of their churches. Their communities their communities hate them because they're speaking out against this like aggressive propaganda from these fossil fuel companies. And so I think when you think about how do we meet people where they're at, how do we find common ground with people who don't agree with us, we also have to think about who are we to do that? For me, I can only speak to people in my community that I have a relationship with and really get through to them. I can't just go find some random Trump supporter on the street and be like, listen to me because I know better. What's my relationship with this person? Why would they be incentivized to listen to me? And I think the hard part of that is that means you do have to have really difficult conversations with people in your life. You do have to talk to your neighbor who has the Trump flag up and be like, hey, how you feeling about those tariffs? You do have to have that conversation with your great aunt that watches Fox News and OAN and know that she's going to say some crazy shit and she's going to be offensive and it's going to be a difficult conversation. But if you don't, who will? Mm-hmm. And I think within that too, because I've spoken about this online before and people have been like, well, I'm this marginalization and I shouldn't have to do that. You're right. I don't think that this should fall on the most marginalized in our community. But I do think that some of us are not that. So some of us do need to step up. For me, I think about how can I use my privilege, how can I use my positions of power to do some of that work so it doesn't end up falling on the most marginalized. And it's uncomfortable. And you're not going to get through to 9 out of 10 people, but that one person you do get through is really, really valuable because frankly, and this is something that people, especially in the online left, don't want to hear, if we had the numbers to get out of the situation that we're in right now, we would be out of it. We don't have the numbers. So we do have to find some sort of common ground. And that means that we also might have to compromise on a few things. And that's tough to think through, what are you willing to compromise? What are you not? And it's what are you willing to compromise? I think that's another issue that people get into is well, these people, they should, this is more important. So they should be willing to compromise this. Who are we to say what other people should be willing to compromise?
Yeah.
We can only speak to what we're willing to compromise and then try to get other people to there with you. But yeah, I think people do need to start having some difficult conversations. And as much as I'm against the whole fuck around, find out idea, some of that is going to inherently happen. I think especially in this moment with these tariffs, people are going to be really struggling. And maybe your opportunity to connect with them is at the food bank because both of you are broke and you can't afford eggs anymore. Maybe the opportunity to connect is in line at the unemployment office. We're about to go through really, really bad times. I think people haven't really a lot of people have not fully comprehend how bad the economic position we're in is. But that can be a common ground that you have with someone. You're both broke. You're both miserable. How can you figure out how to get that together?
Ooh, that is so real. And I think you're bringing up a lot of important tenets of just abolition in general, which is not throwing people away and being willing to ask, like, what are your needs that I might not be aware of? And how have you been convinced that I'm your enemy or that another marginalized group is your enemy? And how do I kind of deprogram you in that way? But it has to happen through deep conversation and relationship building. And a lot of us are just not willing to cross that. I think practicing with family is like a first point for a lot of people, but ultimately we don't want to put in that work with our neighbors and and you know, people that we don't have to, but we need to, because we are realizing we are more interdependent than we realized. So I know that things are bleak. I know things are about to get really, really hard, and they're already hard, so that's saying a lot. But what, if anything, is bringing you hope right now? What do you hope people will do that could, you know, not lead us to this place of just, you know, just personal and institutional destruction? Like, is there anything that is making you feel optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I hold on to is my ancestors have been through worse with less. Like my ancestors were enslaved. Like I just think about the resources that I have at my disposal and like the community I have at my disposal, and I'm like, yeah, we're going through a really, really rough time, and yet, like, look at what our ancestors went through to get us here. Like, who am I to not keep fighting forward and thinking of the people ahead of me who, like, will be still going through hardship. Future generations are still going to go through hardship. We're not finding world peace in the next couple of years. But I don't know, how can I make it easier for those future generations, just like my ancestors made it easier for me? And I also think that, like, I really try to put myself in positions to see things that give me hope. Like, I do a lot of community work. Every week I go and make a meal for members of my community, and the people that I do that with, they're such beautiful people, and they're hopeful. And so just to be in that space around other people who are like, look, there's not a lot we can do, but at least we can feed someone, like, that is so nourishing for the soul, at least for me. And it's also why I talk so much about mutual aid on my page. I feel like it has, like, actually saved my life to be able to, like, get involved in communities like that. And it's made me so hopeful. And I want other people to be able to tap into that hope. And then the other thing, I've really had to, like, dig into the books. Some of them, like, fiction, some of them nonfiction. But so often I'm able to find messages of hope within there. I just finished Braiding Sweetgrass, which is about to be, like, my new Bible. It just made me feel so good inside. I have a friend that just recommended a book to me that's about, like, it's like a speculative fiction about the idea of, like, a New York City commune in the 2050s after, like, a revolution within the United States. Like, I don't know, that's, like, yeah, it's fiction. Who knows what's actually going to happen in the next 30 years? But, like, that's kind of hopeful for me to think that, like, somebody has the radical imagination to see a better world. And if somebody else has that radical imagination, why can't I as well? I actually think that's, like, the big thing lacking right now, is we are all so struck by our fear that we're not letting our imagination push us towards hope. We're not letting our imagination think about solutions that are beyond what we're seeing and what we're doing and what we know already. And I get it, because it's me too. I have been stunted a little bit in my imagination, but I don't know. I think that there's just so many brilliant people thinking about this that inevitably someone's going to figure it out and things are going to get better. And maybe that's naive, but I've got to believe it.
Well, just be like me and be a local optimist.
No, when we need it. I really do think, I mean, I think some people are falling a little bit into a politic of misery, and it's easy to fall into that, because who's not miserable? Things are so bad. But, like, I don't know, I have to be glass half full. I have to have a politics of joy and love, because I feel like that's what that type of politic is what led to me. And I like myself, and I want more people like that out in the world. So I have to put that energy out too.
So thank you for that
so much. We're just so grateful. I mean, there's so many things you said that I'm like, I want that tattooed on my forehead. Like, like really important things, and especially that not succumbing to a politic of just like negativity and just assuming the worst. And our ancestors did more with less. We're dealing with more and have less resources. And I think that's so important to remember, that as bad as it feels, like we have so much at our disposal. So we are so grateful to you. Let the people know where they can continue to follow you and support your work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was just an awesome conversation. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at NotHannahBanana. If TikTok is still around, I will be there at Hannah is over this, with like periods in between. Otherwise, like, find me on the streets in Brooklyn. Like, come say hi, come do some work with me. I do a lot of work with We the People. If you're in New York and ever want to get involved, they do monthly meetings that people can get tapped into. There's a weekly cooking opportunity that, like I said, it just brings me so much joy. And if you're not in New York and still want to support, they have I can't think of what it's called, but there's a way to donate to support the work that they're doing in feeding their community and housing their community. And yeah, if you want to see me on the street, it's probably doing some stuff with We the People. So
yes.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone check out We the People. I'm a huge fan of them. They're doing amazing work, to your point. And for those who are just tuning in, you are watching On the Other Side of Change. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
This conversation is far from over. Every single day, we're going to see something on the news that is going to make us reevaluate this conversation. And hopefully you all learn something, are being sparked by the conversation. But, there's a lot at stake and we all have a role to play.
And if you want to dive deeper, we got you with recommendations. So check out the book, One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad. Another book and a memoir, They Called Me a Lioness by Ahed Tamimi. And Except for Palestine by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick. You can also follow people like Linda Sarsar, on-the-ground Palestinian journalist Bisan, and groups like We the People, who comes highly recommended from both Hannah and Jamira and are doing really, really great work.
Yes, and as always, stay engaged, know your rights, organize, and hold your representatives accountable. Until next time, keep pushing for the future.